All right, guys. Do you believe in conspiracy theories? Is the moon a giant spaceship? Is the Earth flat? Are birds even real? Well, how about a conspiracy theory that John Adams is a vampire and he's trying to take over the government with a vampire army? Well, that might be true. But you know what explores that? This book does. Kiladelphia. So I kind of gave a little bit of a spoiler for it, but that's okay. You're going to enjoy the story. Here's the front, the spine, and the back. So, of course, before I get started, this is an adult book. It has blood, it has gore, has body parts flying everywhere, boobies flying everywhere too. So just be conscious of that. But let's take a look at Kiladelphia. All right, so let's go ahead and take a bite out of Kiladelphia, book 1. Now, this was a really interesting story. I'm not too much a guy for horror stories, but this one was really intriguing. Now, we're going to go ahead and start off by meeting James Sangster, James Sangster Jr., and then he's basically figuring out what happened to his dad, who died. His dad was a detective. He's also a police officer. And, you know, we kind of see how it starts off with the dad looking for this young teenager here. And he goes looking for him. His name is Tevin Thompson. And what he does is he gets ambushed. And basically in Philadelphia, there's this area called Hell Hall, which is basically like the slums of Philadelphia. And he goes in there to look for this kid. And he gets taken out. So then you also meet Josie Padilla. Now it's spelled Jose. I'm gonna zoom in there so you can see it. It's Jose, but I'm gonna assume that he's wanting to say Josie. That's just me. It's a woman. Why would they call her Jose? Josie Padilla. She was a chief medical examiner, and she and her dad and James Senior, basically James Senior, were investigating a string of murders in the Hell Hall, that slum, with vagrants and homeless people. And it looks like basically they had been turning into vampires. Now, of course, they didn't believe it, but when these, at night, in the morgue, wherever they have the bodies, you see that they basically were just clawing at the walls. But then when they would go in the day, they would be back where they were resting. But you see the door, it's all, scratched up. So, of course, James Jr., the son, doesn't believe it, but you see how he's reading his dad's journal and how his dad was investigating, and basically he had found out that John Adams, the former president back in the 1800s, was actually the leader of the vampires. And then we see this kid, Tevin here, that he finds, and he's been looking for him, who might lead him to where John Adams is. And basically, he doesn't believe it, but, Josie tells him it's true, so he goes and he digs up his dad, who is now a vampire. So they're basically trying to find out what John Adams is wanting to do. She's giving him blood, so the three of them, Junior, Senior, and Josie, are going to figure out what the plan is to stop these. And then it kind of also gives you some stories of this girl and how she basically kills and how they hunt. And then we meet, of course, the John Adams as he is now. He's a much more modern businessman. He has, of course, these vampires that are, he makes them feed on homeless people, but they're planning to basically have a takeover of the United States, or starting with Philadelphia, because, that's where the Declaration of Independence was signed and all that stuff. So he wants to make that the birthplace of the vampire nation. And Tevin, of course, here is one of his lieutenants, and he wants to... But Tevin doesn't really seem into it. He's like, this is what you want. This isn't really what I want. So then, Senior here is telling him how they have to kill the vampires when they come in. They, of course, are not fully vampires, so they have to kill them. But then they open up the locker, and the vampires are coming out. Wah! And then you get to see a little bit about Tevin. He's basically... lost his grandma, who was his world, and she didn't want him. He even asked her, he's like, do you want me to turn you into a vampire? And she's like, nope, no thank you, I'm okay with dying. And then you get to see John Adams' story, Here, of course, they're already starting to come out, and they're fighting these vampires, staking them. And it gives you his backstory of how he was, a president, and then they decided to travel to the Caribbean. And while they were there, of course, he got infected, or he got bitten, and they gave him a magical book that nobody had been able to decipher. So he's looking to get that. But in the meantime, he was growing his army to take over. And it kind of tells you about how he went through time, changing who he was, and killing himself, but still kind of working behind the scenes with the political parties, like his wife and his kids, making sure that they joined the political party so that they always had some sort of influence. And then him and his wife, Abigail, are the vampires. So they decided to just keep going as vampires. Here we go. Now you meet Abigail. Turns out they broke up, after years together, centuries. She was like, I need to go ahead and be my own person. So, they're still cordial, but they're not together. She has her own interests, runs a brothel, as you see here, a little nudity. So just a lot of nudity, so just be aware of that. And they're basically like, oh, we're going to start a revolution. They start attacking people, like in the subway, as you see there, in broad daylight. And they decide to take out, I believe, the police station. Yeah, and they take out the services. So then they're like, we have to stop him. And then you see here in the city, it's already being overrun. And they're like, oh, the city's going to fall, and then the rest of the world will follow. And after that, Tevin, turns out he had been guarding the book for John Adams. And you got to get a little bit of his history, how he was just like living through life like whatever until John Adams kind of gave him a purpose. But at the end, he doesn't want to do that. He wants to actually stop him. And he deciphered the book. And he wants to use that magic power to stop him. And then we see here that it's actually like it was from basically the Earth folks, and it was the universe, like, old traditional religions like that, mysticism that kind of led to the vampires. And it's more magic than like, biological stuff. Then we meet this little girl's like family, and she's like, oh, I guess Tevin can turn people back from being vampires into humans, which she did for this girl, which is her sister. But the little girl's like, I don't want to be a vampire. I want to live forever. So she rejects her offer to become back into a human. But the little girl, of course, like, they're badass. They kill people, rip their heads off, stuff like that. And then this is like his top lieutenants of the vampire army. They attack the police who are trying to stop him, which is James and Senior and Father, and then Josie. They attack them. So you see they're coming at them. But then Tevin's there with them, and he's like, nope. Bam! He uses his powers. Bam! Bam! Explodes them. Then Top Hat here, which is like I guess like the second in command almost. He basically burns them like . And then we see Abigail and John Adams there, starting to take over the city. This is the mayor. I guess the mayor had helped them. He wanted to be part of like their council or whatever, but he wasn't a vampire. He gets, of course, eaten. And then we see where Tevin on the steps of the city hall or the courts. Tevin and John Adams fight using their magic, and just when John Adams is about to beat Tevin right there, James Senior sticks him through the heart. Wham! Oh no! And so by doing that, they basically figured out that by killing John Adams, it'll take away the power that he had over the rest of the vampires, so they can stop them. And then the army comes in and basically firebombs Hell Hall, which was where most of the vampires were. And as you see here, like, they're all like shooting them with pow, 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 pow. And then so as he's melting, he's like, you're under arrest, Mr. President. Yes, you have the right to remain silent. Click, click. Oh, bro. Now, this is definitely set up so it would make it a really good show or movie. Like, the character looks like, he He has been in like commercials, and he plays a detective, the senior. Like this actor that looks just like him would be perfect for him. And I'll show you another character that they have in there who I'm like, this would be perfect for Drake. So Abigail's like, your idea was wrong. We don't need to try to take over the government. We just need to kill them all. So she's like, so says the founding mother of the new world. And so, James Sr. just like, you know what, it's my time to go. I need you to bury me. I need you to let me go. So, they kind of make up. Him and his dad had a strained relationship, and they talk about it here. That he felt he was never good enough for his dad, and the dad kind of had acted that way too. But at the end, he was like, we helped save the city, and he finally apologizes and tells him he's worthy, or he loves him. And then he basically buries his dad, and he takes off. So then after that begins, I would say, the second part of the book, which is where Abigail now is trying to take over. And it's basically, I believe, about 6 months after this event, and James has decided to be a detective in Philadelphia. He decided to stay there with Josie, and they're kind of in a relationship. And then we see Abigail here with her group, Top Hat here, who's still, I guess he survived. And then they have like a slave vampire. His name is Jupiter, but he's like massive, and he's like super, super ferocious. And here he goes. He kills people like real bad, like rah. Anyway, she kind of controls him. And then you see Josie and James are in a relationship, living in the dad's house. And they're like, we need to investigate because there's been more reports of more murders. Well, then, Abigail decides to, make a big stand, or show a big thing of taking over the government by killing the governor of Massachusetts. Philadelphia is in Massachusetts, right? I think so. I hope I'm right. But yeah, she basically kills him. And so now people are like panicking. And now we see James Sr. He's basically going through hell. Like, that kind of goes more into like the spiritual part where he's going through hell. And he kind of seeing his life in a way. They're trying to figure out what's going on here. James, the son, Junior, and then, Senior's going to hell. He's taking the ride to the river Styx. And they're like, oh, you're a vampire, so you have a foot in both doors. So you don't really have a place to go. But he's like, but I can take you to your wife. And so he's like, what? And he's excited to go see her. So he's like, yeah, you see Abigail. She's like, oh, and then they go through hell. He sees people like, this is the mayor who had betrayed the city before that got killed. He's in hell burning. Then we see this girl like they're like, we need to make another big entrance about the vampires. So they decide to send him to a concert. And this is where that guy is that looks like Drake. See, look, I'm telling you, it's Drake. I'm going to zoom in so you can see that. And they send Jupiter to kill him. And he basically kills him on stage. Very much Drake. And he kills him. And so they're making a bigger impact to try to take over. And then basically James gets sent to be with his wife who was in heaven. And they're basically there together. They're like, oh, this is so great. And then while he's there, like, we're going to spend eternity together. And they're so happy. He gets pulled out. He's like, no, what's happening? The son basically brings them back because he needs his help to stop Abigail. And then the dad's like, this better be really effing important. So he's able to like come back, which is weird. Then we have, of course, a little bit more of the history of Jupiter. And they're like, oh, look, this is what's happening. And then you see what happened with Jupiter, how he was John Adams' like slave, Thomas Jefferson's like slave. And, he was loyal to him, but in the end he was just property because Thomas Jefferson like sold his family. And then he got his revenge later on. Yeah, like you'll see, where is it at? This is more about what they're planning to do. Then they're like, oh, Abigail's like, we got to take out their infrastructure. So they decided to take out the Wi-Fi and all communications. And then you see here's Thomas Jefferson. He's like dying, and there's vampires like feeding on him. And he's like, please help me. Please, Jupiter. But Jupiter's like, no, you sold my family. Forget you. And he leaves and lets him die. So they're looking for Abigail. And they basically go over to her brothel, and then they get attacked by vampires. And Jupiter gets taken into the prison so he can turn all of the prison system into vampires, and he does, and they take over, as you see there. Then we get some more information about Top Hat, and then everybody's fighting, blah. Okay, so the event started. They're trying to take over. This gives you more information on Top Hat and how he met John Adams. And right now the conflict is, of course, with Abigail, but right now James and his son are kind of tense because he took him out of heaven, basically, where he was with his wife, and he hasn't told James this as Junior. So, you know, I'm pretty sure he doesn't want to break his heart that he was with his mom and all that stuff. But then Jupiter's like, I guess he decides to, like, you know, take revenge on the vampires, and he's there to kill Abigail. Then we see that, you know, John Adams is in prison, as you see here. And then look, oh, Tevin shows up. Hey, what's up? He's like, I need your help to stop Abigail. You know, you're the only one who can. Because, you know, Abigail and her vampires are basically trying to take over. And while Jupiter is trying to attack her, she, well, you'll see. But John Adams is like, why are you, you know, why do I need your help? Or why should I help you? And he's like, I can get you out of this hell that you're at, or this purgatory. Then we get some more information about Abigail. She actually fell out of love with John Adams, and she fell in love with this girl, but she decided to leave her. And, you know, so that's kind of like a little backstory on them. So then they decide to go ahead and go, yeah. So she, like, fights Jupiter, and she actually beats him up or kills him. No, she doesn't kill him. She definitely, like, kills him. But then, like, they're attacking everything. This was really sad to me. Like, you see, like, there's vampires running around. This mom and dad are like, oh, no, we need to go. Ellie, we have to go now, you know, and she's coming. And then the little girl's there. And then, like, daddy is like, Ellie? And he turns around, and she's like, the vampire has her in his... Bro, I have a daughter about that age. I had to stop reading here and just, like, catch my breath, because I was like, ugh, what if it was my kid? Anyway, so basically, Tevin goes into hell to get the help of, like, I want to say, like, the devil, but so this is where that spiritual part comes in, or the spiritual realm comes in, because they're basically looking for Abigail to kill her, and Tevin comes in, and he gets the help of this guy. He has his name, I think it's, I don't know what his name is. It says it on here. Anyway, he's like, why should I help you? And he's like, you know, the vampires don't really have a place to go, and if we get to kill them, then they get to, you know, come, I don't know, they get to come back into hell, and you can torture them. And then the girl bites James Jr., unfortunately, and he's like, Jimmy, oh no, and Abigail's there. And just as she's about to, you know, like, kill them, John shows up with Tevin here, and he's like, I think we need to talk. And that's how book 1 ends. And then the rest of this, of course, is cover gallery. So they definitely left you at a cliffhanger. Again, very interesting. I wasn't sure what I was jumping into when I was reading Killadelphia, and the whole aspect of, you know, John Adams being the president who had turned into a vampire, and he'd be living all these years to try to take over the government and, you know, make a new world order. That was really interesting. I got captivated pretty quickly. I'm actually invested now. I want to read the next part of this, I'm sure, when it comes out in book 2. But yeah, what's going to go with Abigail? What's going to happen to James Jr., who just got bit? What's going on with James Sr. and Tevin? And how are they going to stop them? And what was the deal that he made with that hell demon or whatever? That's very interesting. So, yeah, pretty cool story. I wasn't expecting the whole aspect of the president, and I wasn't expecting the whole aspect of, like, the spiritual demon and magic stuff to come out. So that's interesting. And then there's also an additional part here that I'm going to show you real quick. Besides the covers of the galleries that you see here, there's another story, and this one is called Lyceum's Gardens, and it does tie kind of. So it's about werewolves, and about these 4 werewolves that have been going on for nearly a millennium, and they're like from, like, back in like, what do you call it? Like Sicily, 827 AD, so like almost a millennia ago, more than a millennia ago, and how they got cursed to be vampire or werewolves. And they've been living for that long, and how they're basically at the current time. Well, this is more in like in the 1960s with Malcolm X and all that, and how they're part of the civil rights movement and wanting to be part of that change. And they're like, oh, we have to find the answer in Philadelphia. And they're really like strong, like bullets don't hurt them, and they're able to like take immense amount of damage and then still keep going, but they're very brutal. I really like how the design is with the ears like super pointy. But basically during the day they're weak. During the day they're human, so they have to go. They're like, we have to leave. So they're like, where are we gonna go? And they're like, where are they? And they're like, the people who can take away their curse, where are they? And they're like, Philadelphia. So maybe that'll play into the next book, which is pretty interesting. But that was also a really cool story I liked. Then of course it has like the making of Philadelphia with how he drew it with pictures, or he had models and then he drew it, and he did a really cool job about that. But yeah, really interesting story, guys. I highly recommend it. If you haven't read this and now you saw this overview, I would definitely take a look if you can, just because it's pretty interesting. I think I haven't been interested in vampire stories in quite a while. American Vampires is also really good, but this one I like how it has the aspect of the president, of important people becoming vampires to, take over the world. Some other stories are just about the vampires themselves, but this one is like a more structured, all-encompassing government kind of a group trying to take over. So very cool. I really enjoyed it. I recommend it. I thought it was good. I once I started reading about the major story, I was like, whoa, I really wanted to know more. So very interesting. Kiladelphia. Get at Organic Price Books, guys. And I'll see you in the next one.